Good morning from southern Arizona, where it's a beautiful morning a couple days before Christmas, and I'm recording a video of the veterans from the Bakke family, or anybody related to the Bakke family. So please bear with me as I go through the slides. The first one that I will have is my father, Adolf Bakke. Born in the late 1890s, was drafted into the U.S. Army in December of 1917 after the United States entered World War I. He went to the Presidio in California for his training after completing basic training, and was assigned to the artillery park of Company C, Battery C of the U.S. Army. Promoted to PFC following his training, and left from Hoboken, New Jersey, aboard ship to Europe, arriving in England and then in France on 20th September 1918. He saw action in several places in France, the Argonne Forest, Verdun, Messus, in Europe. He enlisted, or was drafted, along with 5 other people from the Newfoundland, Minnesota area, one of whom was his first cousin, August Bring. And I do not have a photograph of August, but I do have his tombstone from the cemetery near Newfoundland, Minnesota, showing that he served in the U.S. Army during World War I. The photograph in the middle lower part is one that I got from a newspaper clipping that showed the 5 soldiers that had left from Newfoundland area entering the U.S. Army. The person second from the left is my father, Adolf. The person second from the right, I believe, is his cousin, August Bring. Interesting story about August's father, Andrew Bring, who is married to my grandfather, Peter Bakke's sister, Gertrude. He came to the United States with his family, was quite a few years older than Gertrude Bakke, had a family in Sweden where he grew up, and served in the what I believe to be the equivalent of the Swedish Home Guard, similar to the National Guard in the United States. Getting back to Adolf Bakke's family, the oldest son, my oldest brother, Robert Bob Bakke, after completing his basic training, he went to radio operator school at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, and then was ordered to Germany, where he spent the next couple of years, not quite, couple of years in Germany. He apparently did take some vacations while he was in Germany. We would call it leave rather than vacation. And he took, according to records that I found, a 10-day leave in June of 1954, and then another short one in July of 1954. In June 1954, Bob was named Soldier of the Month, which is quite an honor for all of the Army folks that were stationed in Germany at the time. Bob and I got along extremely well. He was my big brother, if you will, and we were friends until he passed away a few years ago. After he served in the Army, he completed the auto mechanic program at the Hanson Trade School in Fargo, North Dakota, and then decided to go out to the West Coast, Seattle area, to sightsee and probably find a job. On his way back, he stopped in Devils Lake, North Dakota, and found a job at the Chevy dealership in Devil's Lake. He also met and married Mary Ann, his wife of many years. And they have two wonderful kids born to them, Shelley and Ken. Ito's second son, Arvin Peter Bakke, went by the name of Pete, was drafted in the Army, and after completing basic training and some advanced training with the Army instituted an early out program. They had determined they had too many Army people. This was in the latter part of the 1950s, and the U.S. was not involved in any major overseas operation. It was after Korea, it was before Vietnam, and they were offering an early out. Pete decided that he didn't really care for the Army all that much, so he opted out. He never notified my parents or our family that he was coming home, and my mother almost had a heart attack when she saw him coming into the driveway of our home, being discharged from the U.S. Army. I included a picture of myself, the third son in the family. I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force because ever since I'd seen a recruiter at Newfoldland High School when I was in about 7th grade, I wanted to be in the Air Force, and I even considered making it my career. I would say I was lucky. Maybe it was based on some talent that I had, but I'd completed a year's worth of college at Moorhead State College before enlisting. And that, along with my test scores, gave me the opportunity to take a language test. It was a test that was made up. It wasn't a real language that was given to us at basic training in San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base. I passed the test and was assigned to go to language school at University of Indiana. Extremely tough duty, of course. There I was, 21 years of age, stationed on a college campus, getting paid every month, didn't have any expenses for room, board, anything, books, whatever. And the really difficult thing about our time at the University of Indiana was that the dormitories that we stayed in were next to some women's dormitories, and we ate at the same dining hall as the women dormitories. Following University of Indiana, I went to Goodfellow Air Base in Texas, received some additional training on the Russian language, and also went through the course on military intelligence and analysis, stationed at Misawa Air Base, Japan, for 2 years, plus a couple of months at Fort Meade, Maryland. I got out in 1968. Larry Bakke, the fourth son in the family, was not in the military, so I looked up his birthday number in the lottery, the military draft lottery that was going on in the 1960s, and realized that his lottery number was 357 out of the 365 days in a year. So he knew for sure that he'd never get drafted, decided that the military wasn't something he was interested in doing. Anyhow, he enjoyed staying in the Newfoldland area. Very likable, outgoing young man, and the picture at the right is of him being the cook at a Bakke family reunion at the Old Mill State Park west of Newfoldland, Minnesota. An interesting story about Larry is he was a horseman. He loved horses, rode horses, had him on a buggy, on a wagon, whatever you want, on a sleigh. And one time when he was out riding, he happened to meet this young woman who was also riding a horse. Her name was Heidi. They met and dated and fell in love and got married. I do remember one time when Bob and Marianne, Larry and I were at a campground in northern Minnesota, and after having a couple of beers, little brother, as I called him, Larry asked me, he said, "Big brother, what's it like to be in love?" Of course, my flippant answer was, "I don't remember, it's been a couple of weeks." Larry's wife, Heidi's father, Urban Strandberg, uh, entered the U.S. Army in August of '65, was assigned to Vietnam, arriving there in May of '66. And as you can see, he was assigned to C Company, 28th Infantry, 2nd Battalion. And on 3 January 1967, he was killed in action at the Binh Dong province of South Vietnam. Continuing on, Ato's son-in-law, Harold Johnson, served in the U.S. Army during World War II and was wounded in battle. He died of those wounds shortly after he and Avis were married. He and Avis, my oldest sister, had 2 children, Helen and David Johnson. David, you'll see on a later slide, was also a member of the U.S. Navy. Some of the interesting things about Harold and Avis is that in Section 10 of Marsh Grove Township, where my family farm was, 160 acres, was in the southeast corner. In the northwest corner was Holger Johnson's farm. Holger Johnson's son, Harold, met Avis, and I like to think that they met out in the woods behind the family farm. Whether that's true or false, I do not know. As I mentioned, David Johnson, Harold and Avis's oldest son, only son, enlisted in the U.S. Navy in the 1960s, served honorably. He spent one tour in Vietnam, returned to Minnesota, and spent the rest of his life there. Dave and I were not that far apart in age. We got along really, really well. He rode a motorcycle. I rode motorcycles. We had the military experience in common, and Dave was just plain enjoyable to be around, and we do miss Dave. After Harold Johnson passed away, my oldest sister Avis met Melvin Matson, who also served in the U.S. Army. He was born east of New Fulden, and after a brief courtship, he married Avis. And Avis, at that point in time, had 2 children from Harold, Helen and Dave Johnson, and Melvin helped raise those 2 children, plus the 4 more children that he and Avis had together, Bev, Marty, Marlon, and Levon. Wonderful, wonderful kids, all of them. And I still am in touch with them. My mother's brother, Chester Chet Gast, grew up not far from the Bakke family farm, probably about 4 or 5 miles. He was my mother's youngest brother, and he served in the Army during World War II. I know he did basic some training in Wisconsin because I have several pictures of some of my family members going to see him while he was stationed in Wisconsin. Whether he saw combat or not, I do not know. I have not been able to find that information. Interestingly, he married Gladys Johnson, who happened to be the sister of Avis's first husband, Harold Johnson. The two of them, Jet and Gladys, had 3 children, Tommy, Diana, and Stephen Gast. And I still see the family in a somewhat irregular basis. Diana does come down to Green Valley, where I am now living, and spend some time here, and we always get together when she is in the area. Gladys is in her mid-90s now, still alive and very, very lively, and lives alone in a house in Newfoundland, Minnesota. But we have talked on more than one occasion about the feeling that she had that somehow my family did not like Gladys. And I do remember that from when I was young and growing up. There were some animosities that happened from something between the two families, Gladys and Chet and my parents. What it was, I have no idea. Was it anything significant? I doubt it. But it was there, and neither of us know why. Gladys and I get along extremely well. We always go see her when we're up in the Minnesota area in summer vacation when it gets too hot in Arizona. My father's youngest sister, Minnie, you can see on the left, married Al Aubrey, Al Lapp. He always went by the name Al, and I understand. I wouldn't want to be called Aubrey either. She met Al, Minnie met Al while they were living in California, and Al had spent over 30 years in the U.S. Navy. He got out a couple of times, didn't like civilian life, went back in, served a few more years, got out, and retired to Minnesota and lived there until their deaths. Actually, they were in Wisconsin when they passed away down near Chicago, where they had a very, very good VA hospital system. Al was a great storyteller. I enjoyed many hours of listening to him. Minnie was a sweetheart, perhaps my favorite aunt, and they had no children. And Minnie told me about the story when she was younger. She'd been kicked by a cow in the stomach and injured the internal organs so that she could not have children. That's what she told me, and I believe her. My father's second oldest sister, Amanda Bakke, was married to Arthur Lewis for a time. How long, I do not know. I have not been able to find marriage records, nor have I been able to find divorce or death records for Arthur Lewis. I do know that they lived in California, and as you can see from the picture, Arthur served in the U.S. Navy also. I remember Amanda as being, I don't know, not quite as charming and fun to be with as her younger sister Minnie, who I said was my favorite aunt. Bertil Larson, my father's cousin, if we go back far enough, my father's father, Peter Bakke, and Andrew Bakke were brothers, and both migrated from Folvang, Norway, in the 1880s. Bertil Larson was the grandson of my grandfather's brother. He served in the U.S. Army in World War II, saw combat, and was wounded in battle. He went to the aid station, and he was diagnosed, as you can see, with a battlefield wound of the hip and buttocks, with no nerve or artery involvement. In other words, it was a minor wound in the hip, and he only spent a day in the hospital at the aid station. He was discharged. Then during Korean War, he was again called into duty and returned to the U.S. Army, went to Korea, and on 14 September 1950, he was killed in action in Korea. I do not have any photographs of him, but I do have his tombstone marker. He's buried in a cemetery in the southern edge of Newfoundland, Minnesota. His son, David Larson, was drafted into the U.S. Army in July of 1969 and was shipped to Vietnam. And on 27 February 1970, Corporal David Allen Larson was killed in the action in the province of Binh Ninh, Republic of South Vietnam. He was in the 1st Battalion of the 8th Infantry Regiment. He also is buried in the cemetery on the south edge of Newfoundland. You can see these stories. I will post this video on the Bakke Family History site on the web. It is bakkeconsulting.com/family history. You will see 2 photographs on the main page. The left photograph is of my grandparents' family, Peter and Agneta Bakke, both of whom migrated, as I said, from Folvang, Norway in the 1880s. The right-hand picture, let's get back. The left-hand picture, the person on the right side kneeling in front of the child is my father Adolf. Then on the right side is a picture of August Gast Jr., who is the taller man on the left of the photo. And right behind him is my father Adolf. And this is the Gast family, of which August Gast's father, also named August Gast, migrated from Germany back in the 1800s as well with his family. It was kind of unusual. Most of the migration coming from Europe were of single people. He came with his entire family. And the other interesting thing, as I was growing up, and even while I started doing genealogical work, I assumed that the Gast family was German. However, when I did my DNA testing, it showed that about just over half of my DNA showed that I had ancestors from Norway. About a quarter of those were from Sweden, and the others were a smattering of European countries, including a number of Germans. The best that I can figure out that what happened is the Gast family had come to Germany from Sweden during the time that Sweden occupied that part of Germany, which they did for many years. And I'm guessing some of the people that came with the military, whether it was military people or tradesmen or whatever that came afterwards, that is where part of the Gast family ancestry arrived. So Norway, Sweden, Germany, and a smattering of other things is what I am. And for those of my family that are watching this or listening to this, that is what you are. I hope you've enjoyed this. What am I doing nowadays? Currently, I'm living, as I said, southern Arizona, a community, a retirement community called Green Valley. I am still doing computer work. As a matter of fact, I just took on a new job of redesigning the American Legion's website, Post 66, down here in Green Valley. They have all of the Legion family, the American Legion, of course, which I'm qualified for from my service, the Sons of the American Legion, which I am qualified for because of my father's service and membership in the Legion, Legion Riders, which I was a member of up until 2 years ago when I decided that at 78, I think my body was ready to tell me that riding on two wheels is something I shouldn't do anymore. So I gave my bike to my youngest stepson. And then the fourth part of the Legion family is the auxiliary, which my sweetie Bev is a member of because her father served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. As I said before, I hope you enjoy this. If I missed any family members that were in the military, please let me know. I apologize in advance if I missed any of them. Thank you and have a wonderful Christmas.